All right. It is a Sunday night, a day before the week starts. That's why I do it on Sundays. That's why I do PsychoEd Sundays, because we need it before the week starts. At least I do. I usually do a lot of my mental preparation on Sundays because sometimes the week is kind of hard, even to start anticipating or looking forward to. So welcome to PsychoEd Sundays. I am Carlos Martinez, your host. This is Motivated Minds, and I hope we'll see if we have some other motivated minds joining us this evening. I've got some really cool stuff to talk about, and I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I do have my air conditioner running because it's pretty warm here in SoCal. So if you can hear that, I'm sorry. Hopefully it's not too bothersome as we do our session tonight. So I hope everybody's doing okay. It's been kind of crazy, right? Every day we are hearing more tragedies and more tragedies, and it's just, I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm feeling really heavy-hearted these days, and you know what? I need some hope, because there isn't a whole lot of hope out there, it feels like to me. You know, if I'm just looking at what's happening, it can feel pretty hopeless, and that's why tonight I am talking again about hope. I'm going to get a little bit deeper into the weeds with it. Remember last week we talked a little about, just the kind of insecurities that we can carry, right? That a lot of us have. Well, today, instead of, we talked about the antidote for a lot of those. Really, a lot of that is hope. Reframing, evaluating what's going on in my mind, trying to kind of pick apart opinion versus facts, right? Because a lot of what's going on in our head is really based on opinion and not as much factual evidence. So tonight we are going to get, again, deeper into hope, like rooted hope, what hope really looks like, hope that actually, hope that isn't just based on my feelings and my emotions, because that tends to be a very kind of Band-Aid kind of hope. It doesn't kind of get me to the next thing in a healthier way. I want to be able to be more resilient, right? Don't you want to be more resilient? Don't you want to be able to be able to handle the pressure a little bit better when it comes again? I mean, I do. I don't want to cave under the pressure the same way every time. It's like, I don't want to cave. I may fall down the rabbit hole, but I don't have to go as deep. Does that make sense? I don't have to go as deep down the rabbit hole as I have in the past. And what keeps us from going all the way down that rabbit hole, or really deep down that rabbit hole, is hope. And we are going to, so that's what we're going to talk about today. What is hope? I'm going to touch a little bit on review, but most of this is going to be getting into the weeds. So without further ado, let's dig into this stuff. All right. So remember last week we talked about what is hope. And by the way, I'm going to get to, as people come in, I will get to some of you. I do see Lazuka. I see Obs. I love it. I'm so glad you're here. What a picture of hope. Well, this is hope again. Let me just review what we talked about last week really quick. What does hope do? It enables us to remain steadfast in pursuing our objectives. Not only that, it also inspires us to take action. That's true hope. And also, despite the fact that human existence is unpredictable, what does hope do? Even though life is unpredictable, hope actually motivates us to fight and believe that our situation will improve, even when things are difficult. That's real hope. It's not hopelessness, which is, I don't see anything good coming out of this. Hope transcends hopelessness, right? It transcends our situation. It transcends our circumstances. That's what real hope, true hope, grounded hope, rooted hope really does. It doesn't depend on circumstances. It really does It's really a mindset, and it's a very powerful mindset. So let's look at this next one here. So what is the first part of the hope cycle? Okay, I want you to think of it this way. The first part of the hope cycle involves risking. What do you mean? What do I mean by risking? Well, I mean committing to letting go of that thing. Whatever that thing is, you're having a hard time letting go because there's fear, there's anxiety behind it. I don't want to let go. I don't want to let go of that option. I want to hang on to that because I'm so used to using it. It makes me feel better. Or, you know what? I don't see this happening the way that you're talking about it with me. I don't see it. I don't see this situation fixing it the way that you're talking about. I only see it the way I've done it. And the way I've done it, even though it hasn't worked very well ever, I just don't want to let it go. Okay, this is the only way I know how to tackle this situation. Well, guess what? That's not flexible thinking. That's rigid thinking. And so what is the first part of growing in hope? It's flexible thinking. It's letting go. It's accepting that there's a way. There is a way, no matter how you might be feeling, no matter how you might be thinking, what you might be thinking. It's putting one step in front of the other, and it's trusting that change will happen no matter what. See this? Remember I mentioned this word to you before. I said, hang on to the word nevertheless. That's a good word. Nevertheless. Because that's like, nevertheless, whatever I'm going through, I know it's hard. This really sucks. My situation is not ideal. I don't like where I'm at. Nevertheless, I'm going to do this thing. That's flexible thinking. Being able to do something different than I've done before. Okay, so that's, and again, it feels risky. That's why I call it risk, because it feels scary. It feels risky to do something different than I've done before. Okay, and so that's the first one, risking. Now let's get into this next one. Admit it. We have to admit it. Change is actually happening. Okay, listen up. This is really important because we are horrible at this one. We don't do this one well at all. We minimize these. We maximize them. What do I mean? Look at this, what I put up here. Change. It's when the needle moves even a little. Maybe not to my greater expectations, but I'm able to actually acknowledge there has been change, no matter how small. Does that make sense? Like, we minimize the heck out of our progress. We minimize it, we rationalize it, talk to somebody, you've really made a lot of progress. And we're like, yeah, I know, but I could be doing better. Do you see that? That's minimizing our progress. That's minimizing our change process. How many times I have shared with somebody who's really stuck in the negative cycle. They can't see any of their change. And sometimes I have to help someone. I have to ground somebody back to where they were. Do you remember where you were a year ago? I mean, you were in a really dark and desperate place. Look where you're at today. It's amazing where you're at today. And they may struggle with that. Yeah, I know, but I could have. And then I'll say, well, okay, let's look at where you were at even closer. Let's dig in even more to where you were at. And once I start asking them, how were you feeling? Remember how you were feeling a year ago about life? Do you remember the kinds of difficult thinking you were struggling with, the catastrophic thinking, the black and white thinking, the emotional reasoning that you were in? Do you remember all that? And they're like, yeah, I was in pretty bad shape. I'm like, yep. Where are you now? I mean, it's unbelievable change. And you know what? Some of this change even might be for somebody who's struggling with really deep depression. Change might just be getting up in the morning and getting in the shower. Okay? And if you've ever struggled with depression, that's a really hard one to accept, to admit that that's actually change, because it seems so insignificant. We minimize it like, I should be able to do this anyway. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't be patting myself on the back for getting into the shower. Oh, yes, you should. You should be admitting that that's progress, that's change. You couldn't do that a week ago. You couldn't do that a month ago. You're doing it now. And it feels good. Feels good when you do it, right? When you follow through with it. So remember, the needle moves just a little bit. As long as that needle moves a little bit, that means that there's something happening. Even though it may not meet your greatest expectations, it doesn't matter. It may not be getting a first down, but you're gaining a few yards, okay? And you're on your way to getting that first down. Does that make sense? Okay, what's the next step? Well, check it out. This is the faith step. Because I'm one step closer, I'm gaining faith that I can do this again. Because I'm one step closer. Because I'm acknowledging the real change like we did in that last step that's happening. The needle has moved. I'm experiencing motivation to keep at it. Do you see how that works now? I'm increasing in my motivation because, I'm acknowledging that change. I'm feeling better about myself. I'm growing in my motivation to keep at what I'm doing. It's not broken. I tell people this all the time. Why are you trying to start all over again? Why are you trying to find something new when what you're doing is actually working? It's working. It may not be working as fast as you want it to, but it's working. It's not broken. So don't change your strategy if it's already working, if change is happening. So, when we do get kind of stuck, in our unhealthy thinking patterns, it's really hard to get here, but we can. And then the hope is the last part of this. Because that faith is growing. What is hope now? Now I'm able to think and establish clearer goals for myself. We're a lot more, I would say, clear-minded, right? I can follow through with realistic strategies, not crazy strategies, but realistic ones to attain those goals, and now have the flexible mindset to sustain motivation through obstacles that are going to come for sure. Okay, this is true hope. It's huge. It's not false hope. Okay, this hope, if we do it this way and we stick to it, it actually does grow really deep roots. And check this out. I want you to see this. This is really cool. Right here. What's the benefit? I kid you not. I talk about this like crazy because the reward of this is so amazing. If I could go back and actually tell my parents, you guys, what I'd like you to leave behind for me. You know what the legacy is that I don't want the stuff. What I really want is I want resiliency. I want to be able to handle emotionally when things come at me. I want to be able to regulate when I feel hurt, when I feel rejected, when I feel abandoned or neglected, right? When I feel unheard, misunderstood, unseen. I want to be resilient. I don't want to be at the mercy of those thoughts and beliefs. So I would have said, Mom, Dad, can you teach me? Can you teach me how to be resilient, please? It's a way of coping with adversity. And if I was a kid, I'd be like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go through adversity. And so as a child, can you not coddle me too much or rescue me too much? But can you help me work through some of those really difficult things that I'm experiencing? Can you help me with those things? Because I'm going to experience them. So please, my mom did this a lot. She rescued me from a lot of stuff. And so I didn't really learn resilience so well. And this, Mom and Dad, this might help me improve my coping mechanisms for the future. Isn't it amazing? Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to go back? At least for me, it would be so amazing to go back and knowing what I know now, coach my parents to raise me with more resiliency, right? So here's the cycle that we're after right here. Do you see how these two bounce off each other? So increasing hope feeds increasing resilience. Increasing resilience feeds increasing hope. They both come together, okay? They both affect one another. They go back and forth. They bounce off one another. They feed off one another. They get energy from one another. When I'm living in that increasing hope, I'm experiencing increasing resilience. What happens when I'm resilient through that pain? What happens when I'm resilient through that difficult thinking, that fearful thinking, that anxious thinking? What happens? Well, now I actually am experiencing this increasing hope in my life. Do you get it? Isn't that powerful? And as I am experiencing more motivation and increasing hope, the next time I experience some turbulence, it's not going to hit me so hard, right? I'm not going to go as deep down the rabbit hole. Again, we can't avoid them altogether, but we can manage them more effectively. We don't have to crash and burn. We're always going to have a little turbulence, but we don't have to go down, right? We don't have to do that. So I want to remind you of this saying, Charles SNYDER. Remember, this is the father of positive psychology, and he says, a rainbow is a prism that sends shards of multicolored light in various directions. Write this on your heart. It lifts our spirits. It makes us think of what is possible. Hope is the same. It's a personal rainbow of the mind. And as I do every time we go out, I give you the same kind of reminder. How do we grow in this hope that I keep talking about? How do we grow in it? How do we grow in it? Well, it's this. Here are some ways that we can grow in our hope, okay? It's reaching out to others for the benefit of fact-checking. Remember, we need people around us. We need to be reaching out, connecting with people, sharing what's happening in our mind, because a lot of times what's happening in our mind isn't that accurate. It's practicing slowing down and giving your body and your mind a time of rest so that they can be more optimized for tomorrow. That's called self-care. It's be more willing to do things differently than you've done before. That's the flexible mindset that I talked about. It's accepting the reality of right now and allowing yourself to experience the discomfort that you might feel, but move through it. That's the resilience. Remember, I spoke about that a minute ago. The dust is going to settle, I promise. It will. It may take a while, but if we keep at it, the dust is going to settle. Live in radical acceptance of your real self today, okay? And stop judging yourself with expectations of living in your ideal self all the time. Remember, we can't be 100 all the time. It's impossible to be 100 all the time, right? We can't do that. Does this make sense? I hope this is making some sense to some of you out there, because I know some of you are really struggling, okay? I know you are. I know some of you, and I also know, a lot of people who might be watching this, might be connecting with it. You may feel like, what is there to be hopeful about, man? Whether maybe I'm physically suffering right now, and I don't have any hope. I'm like overcome with hopelessness. You might be in a place where there are things out of your control in your family, with your kids. There are a lot of people struggling right now with their children, their adult children, their young children, who are struggling emotionally or struggling with addictions or depression or anxiety. You might be struggling with some of that. You might be having marital issues where you just feel hopeless about the marriage right now. It's like we all have different grades of hopelessness that we might be struggling with. But this is the power of hope. I cannot stress this enough. There are, over and over again in history, we have seen the radical power of hope. If there is a magic wand, literally, if there is a magic wand that can change the way that we see things right now, that change the way that we see our situation, our circumstance, if there was ever a magic wand, it is the magic wand of hope. Seriously. There is no drug that is more powerful than hope. There is no there is no modality that is more powerful than hope. There are some people in history that we have seen who lived in constant fear and anxiety of death, and yet they're not acting like it. They're not thinking like it. They're not living in fear and anxiety, even though that's the reality of where they're living. And instead, they rise above that. How are they able to rise above being faced with such crazy situations? How do they do that? Well, it's the magic wand of hope. It's the power of the hope-filled mind. You know, something we don't realize in our society is how radical hope is to managing distress in our life, to managing really difficult things in our life, to managing pain in our bodies, to managing pain in our minds, you know, to manage distress, to manage uncertainty, to manage so much. There is unbelievable benefits of living in hope. But here's my fear that I see a lot happening today, and I hope you can hear this. The most difficult people, and I can say this because I lived for many years in this place of victimhood. And if we're living in victimhood, it is one of the most challenging things to get out of. The mountain of victimhood, it can hide hope that lives behind it. And when we're living in that victimhood, there is no other way than the way I can think in my mind. There is no other way. Flexible thinking goes out the window. Could it be this? You won't think that way. Might it be this? When we're living in victimhood, there are no options. The only way is the way that is in my mind. But I'm here to tell you that that hope can transcend. It's not some kind of weird, voodoo stuff that I'm talking about here about hope. We have hope throughout history, again, that we can see. I am a living part of it. The kinds of things that I have come out of, there's no way I would have come out of the kinds of dysfunction, tragedy, despair that I've come out of in my life. And that's why I'm a hoper. I have every reason right now to be living in hopelessness. Honestly, I do. I could justify living in hopelessness if I really wanted to. Okay? But I'm not, because I'm holding on to the anchors of hope. Okay? And those anchors of hope are valid and they're rooted. They're rooted deep in the earth. They're rooted deep in my soul. And no matter what happens tomorrow, that makes me want to feel hopeless. I may fall down that rabbit hole a little bit, but I am not going to go deep down into that rabbit hole. I'm going to climb out very quickly because I don't want to live there. I don't have to live there. We don't have to live in hopelessness no matter what our situation is. That sounds crazy to some of you. I bet some of you just think that's insane. If you knew my situation, you have no idea. If you knew my situation right now, you would be saying something different. Well, friend, if you're listening to this, I want to encourage you, do not allow the hopeless monster or the victimhood monster to win. They're fighting for your soul, okay? The victimhood monster is always fighting for your soul. And that monster wants and feeds on negative thinking, fearful thinking. It feeds on control. It feeds on rigid thinking. Okay, what hope wants to eat in order to get stronger, in order to start changing the way that you see your life, the way that you start thinking about your life and your situation, is you start feeding hope these things I just said a second ago. You start feeding hope these kinds of things. You stop isolating. You start reaching out to others. Okay, you start practicing self-care, even though you don't think you deserve it. Right? You start to be more willing to do things differently again than you've done before. You accept what is happening right now, and you don't try to avoid it or run away from it. You allow yourself to experience discomfort, and you move through it. Remember that dust is going to settle. And the last thing, you live in radical acceptance of your real self today. This is reality. And so I'm not going to judge myself. I've had a bad day. I've avoided today. I'm not going to judge myself for that. Okay, I can't be 100 all the time. It's impossible. I can't do it. Right? If we can't be in it all the time, that's okay. We have to learn how to accept that. So there's some really good stuff I'm hoping that you're connecting with. This is going to be a shorter stream today. I just want to tell everybody that there's hope. Okay, and anchors, do those things. Rewatch this. Go through that list because those are powerful anchors. Remember, hope is not something that we can will ourselves to do. We can't just will ourselves to be hopeful. It has to be grounded in something real, like I said before. So what is something real that you can do today for yourself? No matter how much you might feel like you can't do it, or it's not going to work, or it's not going to help. Okay? I mean, we have to be radical about it, everybody, right? We have to be radical about growing this hope, because, especially for some of us, because some of us are living in such a deep, dark hopelessness that we can't think straight anymore. Don't, again, allow yourself to be sucked, to drown that quicksand of victimhood, please. Hang on to some of those branches up above. Those branches are hope. Those branches are people. Those branches are others. Those branches are action, okay? Those branches are really important for us to be able to find our way out of that quicksand. So I hope I'm stressing. I know I can't stress enough. It is probably the thing that breaks my heart the most when I work with people who are struggling with such high hopelessness and high victimhood, because not only have I lived through it, but I lived in a family where we were steeped in victimhood. You know, it's why my mother couldn't get out of her situation that she was in all of her life. And check this out. There were moments where I would see her come out of that victimhood just for a moment. I'd see her come out of that victimhood. I'd see her move into hope. And you want to know why? I can think about it now. All the times I saw her move into hopefulness, you know what was always a part of that? Action. It was always action that got her into a place that's where it started. And then she would blossom in a way that I would never see her blossom before. And then over time, she would fall back into that dark place. She wouldn't root it and ground it enough. And so what would happen when the next devastating thing came? Her roots would come right out, because they weren't really deep roots. They were very shallow. So remember, I don't care what it is that you're doing. Whatever it is you're doing, for whether it's passion projects, it's what you're doing for a living, it's your marriage, it's your family, it's your health, whatever it is, there is hope. And I don't care what you say. There is hope, you see, because hope lives without you. With or without you trusting in it, hope exists. And it's waiting for you to hang on to. Okay? We aren't powerful enough to destroy hope. Hope is here for good. It's here to stay. And we need to learn how to hang on to it, okay? So there's a lot of good stuff today. I want to encourage you. I know we've just been 30 minutes here, but this is a shorter one. See, some of you came in a little late, and that's okay. I'll just throw a couple of these up here before I finish up, because I do see, yep, Lazuka's here, praying for everyone. Hope you're enjoying yourself today. Yeah, it's been an awesome day. Obs, I'm glad you made it. That's one of my heroes right there. And hey, Emily says, hey, Carlos. So she's checking in. She's also checking in with my wife, Meg. And then my wife is saying something really cool. Listen to this. Ultimate anchor of hope for me is that my personal, intimate relationship with Christ. See, her faith is her anchor, which brings me to a really interesting thought. And I think I've shared this with everybody before. Do you know the 12-step program? The 12-step program for Alcoholics Anonymous, it's rooted in hope. Okay? Because if you think about it, and some of you may not know the original story, but there was a small number of people who were struggling with alcoholism. You know, this is over 100 years ago. And the problem with alcoholism back then is you would be institutionalized, and usually you would die in an institution. Okay? Because there was nothing they could ever do for alcoholism. And there was a small number of people who decided to start doing something different about that alcoholism. A small number of people began to establish sobriety. And what they realized was this: we need to have community. We need to have community around us in order to get sober. We need accountability. We need to start coming together in groups. We have to start supporting one another with strategies to stay sober. These people started to change the chemistry of their brains, and they had no idea. But what they created, and what Bill Wilson created, was a 12-step program that's rooted in hope. Do you understand what I'm saying right now? Do you understand the addict's brain? If you were ever to see the addict's brain under a SPECT scan, it looks crazy. It looks like a brain that's fried. Literally. How do you come back from that? How do you change that? Well, with an addict, what they have to do is they have to rely on radical hope to change the chemistry of their brain. They're not getting sober without hope. Those cravings come up, they're not getting through those cravings without hope. The next painful situation comes up where they would usually drink. They're not getting through that situation with resilience without hope. And tragedy happens. That person wants to drink. They get cravings. They don't get through that with resilience unless there is hope. Sobriety for 1 year, they don't get to that without hope. Sobriety for 3 years, not getting to 3 years without hope. Sobriety for 10 years. Sobriety for 30 years. I know people who've been sober for 40 years when they were almost dead. Okay? How did they get there? When alcoholism was such a big issue in their life, drug addiction was such a big issue in their life. How did they get to 40 years sober? It's because every moment they felt cravings, they would practice resiliency. That resiliency would then connect them back to hope. It's this cycle right here. They would get through it, okay? They would get through it, and they would build resilience through that, increasing resilience. That would feed the increasing hope that they can do it again. I did it this time, I can do it again. And they get back again to increasing resilience. They'd have more, they'd get through that craving moment. Of course, all of this is done with accountability and support and a plan. Do you see this cycle, though? It's radical. If addicts can change the chemistry of their brain, why can't we? You know, if we're struggling with some hopelessness in our life, maybe it's physical issues, it's psychological issues, it's family issues, it's work issues. Well, our brain says that we can overcome and see things differently. We don't have to be at the mercy of our situations. I hope this is making some sense, you guys. It's very powerful, hope. It's the most powerful, like I said, if there's a magic wand, this is the king magic wand right here. Okay, and the more that we can live in this kind of hope, the more resilient we will be. And the more resilient we can be with the next turbulent thing that comes, the more hope is going to increase. See that? This is powerful. I don't think there's anything greater to be talking about right now with the current situations that we're in, the current status of our country and the world and so much stuff that's going on. I'm telling you, okay? There is no more powerful time to be talking about hope. We need to eat hope for breakfast, lunch, and dinner right now. Do you get what I'm saying? But remember, the kind of hope that we need to be eating right now is not it's not our own will kind of hope. It's not willing the hope. The kind of hope we need to be feeding on right now is there's hope that is anchored. It's anchored in something. There is I met this person years ago. We were at I was at Starbucks a long time ago. And I want you to listen really closely to these two quick little stories I'm going to give you, because this is also a picture of hope. So, and it has a lot to do with the mind. It has a lot to do with the brain, okay? And the brain, oh my gosh, we know so little about it. We know some things, but when it comes down to it, we don't know a lot about it. It's pretty amazing. It's the most amazing computer in the world. And there is no physical computer that we've made that even comes close to what we do in our brains. And remember, if the brains are this powerful, then we can do some amazing things with it. We can overcome a lot of pain and grief. We can overcome a lot of distress and tragedy. We can overcome a lot of really difficult things that we face in our life. We can overcome them in healthier ways. And so there is actually a sport called freediving. And freediving is one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen anybody do. These divers will actually take on one breath of air. They will dive down to 3 to even, I think the world record is around 400 feet down into the ocean. Okay? One breath of air. How do you do that? How is that possible? That shouldn't be possible. There are lots and lots of ways why you should be dead by trying to do that. Not only by drowning, but you should have a lot of problems, complications with your brain and your body to be going down in such a pressurized depth and coming up. How come you're not dying as you're coming up? It's insane how somebody can do that. But here's the only reason why these people are able to do what they do. Okay? When you watch their training, this is what's fascinating. They don't train all day in the ocean. You know what they train for hours and hours and hours, 8 hours a day? You know what they train? They train their mind. That's what they're training. And what exactly are they training in their mind? What are they training their mind to do? They're training the mind to be resilient when it feels like it's drowning. Are you getting what I'm saying? Their brains, their minds at some point are going to begin to believe that it's drowning. There's distress, and once distress happens, what does the body want to do? It wants to take a breath. They train their body to not be paralyzed with fear. They train their mind. It's basically they're putting their it really is mind over matter, right? So they're meditating all day long. They're meditating with the diaphragm, breathing, and meditating on this thought that I still have some oxygen. I still have some oxygen. Because in reality, they do. There's a little bit of oxygen left in the brain. They're not dying, even though their body is saying, I need a breath. I need to take a breath. And so the world record holder, they asked him, why are you so much better than everybody else? Because you kill it. You really do kill everybody. Why are you so much better? And this is what he said. Because I have more control with my mind than everybody else. I'm just a little bit better with the power of my mind, what I'm harnessing in my mind to control my body. Now listen carefully. If you're struggling with pain in your body, that's how powerful your mind is. Okay? One breath of air, 400 feet, over 4 minutes, 5 minutes in the water, one breath. That's only because of the power of the mind. They're not training their bodies all day. They're training their mind all day. So my last one I'm going to give you is many years ago, there were some scientists who ended up doing some research with some Tibetan monks. And these monks, every year, they would go out and they would pray on these these ledges in Tibet. And it was weird because it was below zero temperatures, and they were wondering, why aren't these monks dying? How come they're not freezing to death? Where's the hypothermia? These people should be dead within 10 minutes. They should be dead, but they're not. And this is what's so crazy. They weren't wearing anything. They didn't even have any clothing on when they would do this. And every year, this is what they do, part of their rituals and their culture. And so they were able to take some of those monks into the research center. Okay, they took them, and they actually analyzed what was happening in their minds, and the research was fascinating because they wanted to know, how do you do this? This shouldn't be possible. Just like the free divers, this shouldn't be possible. You should be dead. Well, it's the same thing. The monks weren't out running in the snow every day. That's not what they were doing. They weren't running in the snow. They weren't, practicing handling the cold that's not what they were doing. They were practicing this all day, meditating with their minds. Do you understand the pain that their bodies must have felt in those temperatures? If you're struggling with physical pain, this one might be good for you. Because their bodies were experiencing pain, but the monks, they train their minds to fixate. They fix their minds to fixate on their temperatures. And so the monks would tell you this. We focus on, this is so bizarre. I know you're going to think this is weird, but this is really true. Let me take a drink. Hang on. A perfect shot to watch me drink. Okay. This is what they focused on. Their spines on fire. Is that weird? They actually visualized in their mind that their spines were on fire. What is connected to the spine? Nerves. That would heat up their body. They were able to increase the temperature in their bodies when they were in below freezing temperature, below zero. Now I'm telling you, if these people can do it, we can do it. You know, I don't see myself meditating for 8 hours a day, but I see myself, I can do a little bit better, right, with harnessing the power of my mind. I've done a little bit of it. That's why I'm not living in the despair and the fear and the anxiety that I used to live in. So I must be harnessing some. You might be too. But we can harness more of that power. We're only harnessing a fraction of it, okay? And people out there, free divers, crazy people who've done crazy things, you know, these Tibetan monks, these people, they're human just like we are, and they should give us hope that if we can harness just a little bit more, maybe we can manage our pain in our life a little bit more effectively, okay? I'm hoping this is helping. I'm hoping you're connecting with it. There's a lot in here, everybody. There's a lot in here for us to connect with. And I did see Mr. Cameron Drunk Replay Squad. Thank you. Yeah, let's definitely watch this over. If you are lacking hope, if you're seeking increasing hope, watch this again. Take some notes. I'm going to do something a little different next week. If you're watching this and you realize I'm back in my home office, well, check it out. My office that I started doing stuff at, my other office, my actual office. There's some like, I don't know, recently they started playing some really awesome music downstairs, and it's creating a lot of noise upstairs, a little bit too much noise. So I think I'm either going to create another night or I'm going to move a night because I really want to do it over there. I really like it over there. There's just a different vibe in my office, and I'd rather be there. So I'm going to see. I'm going to be testing out a little bit here and there. We'll see what I'm going to do. But I hope this was helpful. Thanks, everybody, for being a part of this tonight. There is just a couple here. Let me get a couple here before we get going, before I finish this off and I get into our outro. There is... Oh, there's Mr. Camera Junkie. Hey, man, it's good to see you. Thanks for dropping in, dude. I know you're busy. I know you're doing a lot of stuff. Your show last night, every Saturday night, that was awesome. Yes, hit the replays. Lazuka, yeah, man, God is the greatest, dude. Absolutely. And Emily, family and friends, give me hope, joy, and Carl Spring, give me hope and joy. Thanks so much, Emily. You're awesome. Sly, my resiliency has been born of grief coupled with an internal optimism. Thankfully, the optimism is always more powerful than the grief. I just love when you chime in, Sly, because that right there says so much. I'm going to put that back up for a second. It's connected to grief. It's born of grief. That's some of the most powerful, eternal optimism that can be created. And what you're saying here is that thankfully that optimism outweighs the grief, right? You're above the line. If some of you might make more sense of it this way, the scale, right? Is it hope? Is it grief? Which one? Hope, despair, hope, despair. If we're not feeding hope enough, it's going to win. It's going to weigh more on that scale. And when grief or despair is winning, is heavier, then we're going to feel a lot of hopelessness, right? We're going to feel a lot of anxiety and fear and catastrophic thinking, black and white thinking, and again, emotional reasoning. All these things start to come into our mind when we're down here like this. Does anybody ever remember the movie, the last Lord of the Rings, the original 3 that came out? Does everybody remember the last part of that show where they had to go and get the king of Gondor to come back and help lead an army, a bigger army? Remember Gandalf and those guys went to talk to him? If you remember this, check this out. They walked into that king. Into that, up to that king, and they faced him, and they wanted to ask him for help. There was somebody that had been speaking words to that king for years, whispering in his ear. Interestingly enough, you know what that person's name was? Worm Tongue. Do you have any worm tongues in your life? If you do, yeah, have some boundaries with those people. But this person spoke a lot of negative things into this king's mind over the years, spoke to him, and slowly that king started to feed hope less, and he started to feed grief and despair more. And slowly that scale tipped. Grief was outweighing the hope. And if you could have seen his body and his face, he looked like he was mummified. He just looked pale. He looked sick. He looked like he was 1,000 years old. And when Gandalf said, "My friend, where have you been? I've missed you." And he looks at Gandalf and he hardly moves. He can hardly move. The Worm Tongue speaks into his ear and he tells him, "You better be careful. You better watch out. Gandalf wants something from you. Be suspicious." And the king listens to that negative advice and he says, "What do you want here? What do you want with me?" And Gandalf comes up to him and he says, "You know what? I can see there's something wrong with you. You're not yourself." And Wormtongue comes up to Gandalf. And he says, "You're not welcome here." And Gandalf says, "Get away from me. I don't listen to despair and grief. Okay? My hope is much stronger than you'll ever be." And he pushes him away and he goes to the king and he says, "Listen, you are living in a world that isn't reality. You're not, that is not you. This is you over here." And he says, "I want you to come out of that. I want you to come out of that grief and despair. I'm going to pull you out of that right now." Little did he know that he was being possessed by another sorcerer in the background. And so that sorcerer didn't let him go. That negativity, that darkness wouldn't let him go. And so Gandalf said, "Okay, you need another level of hope right now." And so he takes off his tunic, and this bright light shines onto this king, and this king's like, "Oh, I can't see this." That sorcerer behind him is blinded by this brilliant light, this light of hope, because hope always destroys despair. And so all of a sudden the king falls to the floor because the sorcerer was kicked out of his life. He was removed by this radical hope of Gandalf. And the king looks at Gandalf and he starts to come back to himself. He starts to come back to his original true self. And he looks at Gandalf and he says, "What's going on here?" And Gandalf says, "Oh man, you've listened to far too many lies for far too long, my friend." And he looks, the king of Gondor looks at his daughter and he goes, "Oh, dark have been my dreams of late." And he's back into his hope-filled mind. And then if you watch the rest of that show, you'll see what hope does, because that dude, he did incredible things with a hope that was living in him all of a sudden. And he kicked that Wormtongue down the street. He kicked him down the stairs. "Don't ever come back." Hope wins. We need to hold on to it a little bit more. I also have somebody here. I hope that was interesting for you. My man, my buddy, my friend, Peter Gregg, "Faith is a substance of things hoped for." Wow, I know where that comes from. Hope things to be the base foundation for some. Yeah, it seems to be the base foundation for some. Hope is a substance of things hoped for. It's very powerful. We underplay, we minimize the power of hope. And if some of you didn't hear me say this a while ago, if there is a magic wand, it's hope. If there is, there just isn't anything more powerful when it's true, grounded, rooted hope. Just like you were saying a little bit ago, Sly. That hope that Sly was talking about a few minutes ago, this hope, what is that rooted in? It's rooted in grief that's coupled with optimism. Do you see? Sly is saying, I'm acknowledging that the grief is real. It's a reality. That grief is a reality, and I need to acknowledge it. I need to accept that that's a reality, so that I can move forward with optimism, so I can grow forward with hope. But true rooted hope, it needs you to acknowledge and accept the painful reality as well. That's the biggest kind of hope. Hope that is able to hold both of those things together, not one or the other. They have to be together. So that's a powerful thing. So much good stuff here. Thank you, everybody, for chiming in, for being a part of this today. I get a kick out of doing this. I really do. And, it just brings a lot of joy to my heart that I'm able to, do this Psycho Ed Sunday thing. And I think I can speak for everybody who does their live streams, like Peter, Mr. Camera Junkie. When we're providing this, I heard this really awesome word today where this person said, he talked a lot about what we're doing being for others, being others-centered and not being me-centered. And you know what? There's a lot that's going on in the world right now that's out of our control. But I think we have to start thinking and focusing more on what is in our control. And you know what's in my control? Is to be a servant, is to be a listener, is to be a supporter. I can do those things. I can't even do those things perfectly, but those are things within my power. So let's hope, okay? Let's dig into holding those things together, the painful reality, the painful truths, as well as the hope for tomorrow. Actually, the hope we're experiencing right now. I mean, I always like to say this: my next breath is courtesy of my Creator. That's hope, man. Right? Anything can happen at any moment, right? So living in hope really helps us be present right now with what we're doing, where we're at, for ourselves, for others, right? Power of hope. Man, it's so powerful. I love talking about hope because it is so friggin' powerful. Okay. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me on Psycho Ed Sundays. I will be back next week. We'll be talking about some fun stuff again. Until then, be establishing that hope. Be surrendering to that hope, right? Until next week, live in that hope, right? Be grounding that hope. Remember those things I talked about earlier, the action and all that stuff. We have a lot more within our control to create that hope that we can live in, that can transform the way that we see everything. So let's do it. Till next week. Good seeing everybody. See you next week.